Our State of the U.S. segment tonight, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange reiterated last night on Hannity that the source of the emails he released on WikiLeaks was not the Russian government or a Russian state party. Assange says he's been saying the same thing for months. It's hard to tell whether or not he's trustworthy, though. Take a look.
Can you say to the American people unequivocally that you did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails? Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
Yet President Obama says it was Russia. He expelled 38 Russian diplomats for allegedly interfering in our elections. With me now, former U.S. diplomat Jim Jatras. Jim, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me back, Liz.
Jim, what do you think? Who's telling the truth? Who's lying?
Well, I'm not a mind reader, but I do find what Mr. Assange says plausible. And the reason I say plausible is, look, I can't know for sure. I don't think anybody can know for sure. But if you compare it to the information that the Obama administration has released to support its accusations, it's really very slim. The only thing that even pretends to be hard information is that so-called joint analysis report released by DHS and FBI last week, which starts off with a disclaimer saying you can't rely on anything in this report, and then it doesn't even mention WikiLeaks, doesn't even make a plausible explanation as to how the Russians specifically would have been involved in anything to do with our election.
Right, and that report you're referring to, just for the information for our viewers, it was a joint report from the FBI and Homeland Security Department. It was supposed to provide the evidence that Obama's been talking about, that the Russian government at least directed the attacks, even if they weren't the ones who hacked. But if you look at the report, there's really no evidence there that I can see. And if I missed something, please tell me, but no evidence that I can see. Jim, the way I see it, the Russians did not hack the election given what we know so far. I mean, like you said, there's no way to possibly know everything. They did not hack the election. They possibly hacked the DNC and private citizen John Podesta, but that's not the same as hacking our election itself.
No, it's not. And look, I'm going to shock your viewers here, Liz. Countries spy on each other. Countries conduct cyber activities against each other. And maybe some of the people that were expelled by Obama were involved in these activities. You know that the FBI knows very well who the spooks are over at the Russian diplomatic compound, just as the FSB over in Russia knows very well who our spooks are, running around Moscow and St. Petersburg and so forth. This is friends and enemies alike to conduct these activities. That's a far cry from saying this activity was being conducted for the following purpose, authorized by the following individuals, and then it requires this kind of response from the United States, which, as far as I can tell, is purely political. When you put it in the context, for example, of the big mess at the UN over the non-veto of the resolution about the Israeli settlements, the failure of Obama's policy in Syria, I think what you're looking at is Obama really trying to do his level best in his closing days to throw as much dirt on the White House welcome mat for Mr. Trump to try to undermine his legitimacy and his policies.
Right. I mean, absolutely. I think that that's what many of his critics are saying, that this is a clear effort to delegitimize Trump, to make it as difficult as possible when Trump takes office, for Trump to have as much on his plate as possible. Let me ask you this. As a former diplomat yourself, you mentioned Obama expelled 38 Russian diplomats. He said they were spies. He closed down 2 Russian compounds, one in Maryland, one in New York. First of all, was it the right thing to do to expel these diplomats?
In my opinion, no. First off, look, if they were actually intelligence agents, and as I say, we probably would know which ones are intelligence agents anyway, why do that now? Why do this in the closing days of his administration? I think this is aimed at what Trump has said, that he wants to improve relations with Moscow. This is a broad strategic direction he wants to go on. He wants cooperation with the Russians against radical Islamic terrorism. You know, that thing that Obama won't say. And that is a major priority for him, and I think he's trying to poison the well on that. I don't see how closing a compound where they go with their kids on the weekend is any kind of rational step, and I think that's why Trump said that Putin was smart by not taking the bait and saying, you know what, hey, why don't you bring the kids over to the Kremlin and come see the Christmas tree?
Right, and then that was my next question. These 2 compounds, again, one was in Maryland, one was in New York. What happens at these types of diplomatic compounds typically?
These are vacation retreats, essentially, and we have the same kind of facilities in Russia. This is someplace where diplomats go on the weekends or during vacation periods when they're not going back to their home countries. And this is normal and customary. Look, if you're really an intelligence agent and you're engaged in these activities, are you going to do it at a compound that belongs to your own embassy? No, you're going to find ways to do it covertly. The notion that these are spying compounds, I think, is really far stretched.
Right, although in another sense, I find it a little bit hard to believe that there's not some shady business that happens on that, just because diplomats, if they are intelligence officers, they do need to meet with each other. They do need to talk about this stuff, but President Obama didn't release any of the information about what he found shady happening at these compounds. I'd certainly be interested to know, although I don't have high hopes of finding out that information. Jim, just to circle back to the beginning, again, the phraseology here I think is very important when you talk about Russia hacking the election versus Russia hacking private citizens. I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's right. They did it. It's wrong.
Right.
Or perhaps they did it. It's wrong. They hack us. We hack them. That's how it works here. But I do think it's very important to clarify for our viewers if any voting machines were hacked, any voter registrations were hacked, any ballots that were misconstrued by a foreign intelligence agency. Do we have any evidence whatsoever that that's happened?
No, of course not. And given how decentralized our election system is, it would be virtually impossible to do that. A lot of what goes on in our electoral system isn't even connected to the internet. I don't know how you hack that. Though, even if they did the things that Obama claimed they did, what did they do exactly? If they somehow got a hold of the DNC's emails and released them, what? The dastardly Russians have revealed to the American people what our corrupt rulers are up to? Boy, that is really ugly of them. Why can't they just peddle influence by giving money away like the Saudis do? It's really just underhanded. And by the way, let's again not be naive, Liz. We interfere in other people's elections around the world all the time. So you know there are some dirty games that go on under the table. Countries kick each other, but the question is, did anything like what the Obama people say happened to corrupt our political system actually occur? I don't think it did. I don't think the evidence is there. I think this is all political.
Right, and I think Vladimir Putin himself actually accused Hillary of trying to interfere in their elections, and I believe it was 2011. But to sum up here, I think the truth cost Hillary the election. The Democrats can continue to point fingers at whatever they want. They can continue to blame it. It doesn't justify the hacks if they did come from the Russians, but it wasn't WikiLeaks themselves. It wasn't the Russian hacking themselves, any cybercrime that was committed. It was the truth within these emails. The truth, by the way, which the Hillary Clinton camp never denied. That's what cost her the election, and that's what people wanted to see. Jim, thanks so much for your analysis on this. As usual, it was great to talk to you.